This broadcast is appropriate for all ages right here on hashtag WeAreMovieClub. It's time for Scary Movie Squad. Salutations, I am Cam Ryan. I am conversation ready. This week's movie is Cure for Wellness, because we all have that wellness that needs to be cured. I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in talking about this. This is a pretty good psychological movie. It pulls on you whether or not things are happening. I'm going to go ahead and spoil a lot during this conversation, so that's just what it is. This movie opens really shitty, too. I hate saying that, like, hey, give it 5-10 minutes, but you really got to. At least till he gets on the train, and then, like, that's where the stupidity starts to peter off. So, opens on an almost empty office building. There's an old guy who apparently is named Morrison, goes to get water. He has a heart attack and dies. So, on the plane, there's a guy that's doing a lot of business, a lot of stupid jargon to try to establish him as a reasonable business person type deal. But he's obviously hiding his actions from his co-workers. There's some dumb narration there about basically on the philosophy of class and wellness and what it is to be this or that. It's just really ham-handed to walk into a movie, too. So, like I said, that's where it starts to peter off, but that's where we start setting up legitimate cases for the rest of the movie anyways. But it turns out like it's part of a different guy's last will and testament for the company. And he's not dead, but he left for a treatment center, and I guess with no real intention of coming back, thus being a last will and testament. But at the office, work. You know what? It's fine. Everyone thinks the treated old guy, Pembroke, is crazy, but they need him to complete a merger deal, which is never the case. That's never the case. There's always contingency in the absence of a person, being that he's properly notified and refuses to show up. Other people can act in his stead, given a simple power of attorney, or his vote can be divvied up amongst other people. There are so many other things that you can do that don't involve all the craziness that happens in this movie. So right there, like, I'll give you that we have a bad premise, but it's for the main character's motivation, but the premise for the movie is not the same as the premise for the main character's motivation. But they send the young guy, and he ends up into the mission. He's very gung-ho about, like, hey, I'll do this, and maybe I'll become a senior partner one day. Business. But over in Switzerland, the young guy bonds with his driver. He's chatting, everything. And it's a long drive, mind you. So they're out in the middle of nowhere. No cell service to be had. The town's a little rinky-dink thing that's nearby. And it seems like the facility benefits the town more than the town benefits the facility, if I'm being honest. So on the drive, the driver's narrating background information includes the story of a baron who used to own the facility as his castle. The short version seems to be the baron wanted to bang his sister. She was the only one pure of blood enough. I'm going to add the of blood, but the only one pure enough. And the citizens burned her alive. Because if history has taught us nothing, it's to fear vagina. It's sad, but true. Like, that's what history has said. It's not true, like, in the true sense of the word, but that's what history has done. In the facility, everyone's wearing white. They're all old. They're all happy. Because they took their pills today. Isn't that right? So I'll just do the rest of the cast like this. At the front desk, visitors' hours are over. He signs something. We don't know what. And nurse goes to find a manager. No cell service, as established. On the grounds, he goes to fetch a crochet ball or a bocce ball or whatever and finds a weird grate of sorts. This hurts me. This is actually painful. So I'm going to drop it just because it's going to make legitimate smiling harder. He talks to the doctor. They discuss hydrotherapy. So apparently the whole place is built on this. But he rightly points out it's a long way to come just for water. I think it's a good line. I think it's a very good establishing line in the truth of it. The doctor seems cautious about Pembroke leaving. He's concerned about there's a leaking water faucet in there. He seems overly concerned with it during the conversation. And we notice that this is the first time that the young guy, I can't remember his name, drinks the water, is when he's talking to the doctor here. But he drives off. There's a girl on the ramparts. On the road, there's let's call it a deer. It's probably like an elk or something, but jumps into the road. It lodges its horn in the windshield. Now, you could write this off as a ridiculous fucking scene. Animals are crazy. They wouldn't do that. This is a scene I've seen, not in real life, but I've seen the aftermath. Deer are friggin' insane when it comes around cars, and they will attack cars as if it's another deer. They don't make any sense. The only thing that doesn't really make sense about this scene, though, is that the way the horn got lodged in the windshield, it doesn't seem like there was space for it to go in, because it seems like it's just jammed on the horn, like at the base. But the driver doesn't handle it well. The deer's, as he's trapped, is kicking the shit out of the car. The car ends up flipping down the mountain. There's some strange flashbacks to the kid's, or the guy's mother with ballerinas. It doesn't seem relevant to the movie. It's the barest amount of information that they seem to try to drip feed as a red herring. It doesn't. It has to do with the character, not the movie, and it's not really relevant. Other than he has a little toy with him that comes into play later. And it's to remind him of his mom. And that's very simple. Just you show the thing, it's like, oh, this was my mother's, and then you do whatever you do with it. And the stag wants away, but it's tied up in the liner of the windshield because he's beat the shit out of the windshield, so there's no glass left. And it falls over in the road. Who knows if it gets away or not by the end of it, because it's cut and bleeding and tired. So he wakes up in a room in the facility to a nurse. The doctor talks to him about some patients, and it turns out like the guy's watch has stopped. So like he kind of has a memento of like exactly when he was in the accident. He's got a cast on his leg. He got crutches, so he kind of starts to rear window the situation and observe things. He literally has nothing else to do but wait around until he can get out of there, so he's going to sleuth some. And he notices a groundskeeper at the grate from earlier, and I believe he's bricking it over. This place is like full of secrets. It's like, without it being like any kind of like supernatural or creepy thing that we come to learn later in the movie, the place is sufficiently creepy just as a place to be. They don't have to try very hard. So he's drinking the water, and he notices like a small larvae. The closest thing I can think of is actually like a mayfly larvae, or a mosquito larvae almost, which is probably what they use, but he just smushes it and carries on. Exploring the facility and having a good time. A nurse accuses him of being lost. To be fair, he probably was. Oh, there's my phone. Like, I felt the vibration, but I didn't know my phone was like on the desk. And he tells her that he's Pembroke so that he can find Pembroke, because that's the way to do it, I guess. So he makes his way to the steam baths, and then he has a moment where he thinks he's trapped. Yeah, whatever. Okay. and he thinks he's trapped. He walked into like a shower room essentially, and then like he turned around, there was no door. So who knows what actually happened there? If they switched walls on him, if like he was just out of his mind. Who knows? It's just something weird is happening, and it just kind of foreshadows the something wicked this way comes of it all. But he does eventually find Pembroke. He manages to leave that room, and he finds Pembroke, and Pembroke basically refuses. He's like, he's swimming, he's having a good time, he's relaxing, he's trying to not think about business, and honestly, it sounds pretty nice to be able to do that and not have to worry about it, to have the money to be able to do that and not worry about anything. But he goes underwater, and then when he comes up, he immediately starts talking business. Not even like he starts a conversation about business, but he starts talking as if they have been in the middle of a conversation for about a half hour, and he starts like talking about the stock price. Because, like, I don't know if you understand, like, investor commitments, but like a lot of them are based on like the stock remaining above a certain value for the investors. So if the stock drops below a certain point, they have to sell their company back to the investors. And you think like, well, they're investors, they've already bought it, but they have to return. They're obligated to return money as long as the company's afoot. And so if they close down and they return assets to, or either they pay back their investors, one way or the other. So with that in mind, he's like, okay, let's go save the company. And so he's Lockhart, that's the younger guy, ends up waiting for him at the front desk to get the car. The older lady, Mrs. Watkins, talks to Lockhart about the Baron. And the old people try to wrangle him into being like a fourth to make him like join the crowd type thing. And they seem taken aback by Pembroke leaving. Like, they're like, I can't tell if they're jealous that he might be better or they're sad to see him go like he was part of the community. But Lockhart ends up finding the young girl he saw in the ramparts, singing / humming at the pond. I say pond, but it's like a fountain without a fountain in it. It's just a standing thing of water that I hope runs, because otherwise it gets stagnant and has mosquitoes and stuff. But she's a special case who lives there at the facility. She's the only one under 20 for sure. And Lockhart, being probably definitely under 30, is the closest person to her age. And they talk for a little bit, and then Hannah leaves abruptly. In the room, Pembroke is missing, like he's checked out, but he's not there. And so now Lockhart can't find him to leave, even though he got him to agree. The doctor in the dining hall, the doctor tells Lockhart that Pembroke has gotten worse and has to move to the next phase of his treatment, blaming the discussion of business, which is a bunch of horse shit. Of course, like, again, don't need anything supernatural to make that creepy. That's just, oh, we're going to keep him here longer. So Lockhart gets fussy with the doctor. His nose starts bleeding, he gets hypersensitive, and he passes out. So, of course, he wakes up in an examination room, blah, blah, blah. I literally wrote that. More talk about the Baron, Baroness. The doctor wants a urine sample from him to monitor progress. And so he goes to deliver the urine sample. And I don't know how many people are going to use that bathroom to deliver urine samples from all over the place, but there's a whole shelf of them. And some of them are pretty gross, to include Mrs. Watkins, who it looks like she's peeing pieces of fruit, like peaches. It's really gross. I'm actually getting gaggy talking about it. So like he finally goes to like part. I don't know why he's enjoying the therapy there. If he's there to heal his leg, let his leg heal and move on. But he's taking part in the therapies for whatever reason, and so he goes to this full submersion tank, which is in a thing that like I don't think I would ever get in. Like I'm okay with full submersion. Like you put a mask on me and I'm in a tank, whatever. But I'd want the tank to be smaller, so that you just open the tank where you pull a plug and the tank drains. It seems like it's just a death trap, because he puts on the mask and he climbs down in it, and they fill it up, but like at no point could he touch the bottom and the top. It literally looks like it was designed for like 6 foot 6 person to stand on the bottom. You put another 6 foot 6 person on top of his head, and then another one on top of that so that he can touch the ceiling. It's that big a looking tank, and the whole communication process is that he's supposed to be able to tap on the side of the tank, and there's a dude who doesn't get paid enough that sits down the hallway, not even right next to the tank, and watches. Not watches a monitor for life or for vitals, watches the tank from far away. Give me just a second. Don't look at me like that. I'm talking to people. So, and it's all about, he's very much pre-warned about having visions, and it's just toxins leaving the body. I can't do his accent. The closest I can get is like a German accent. I haven't graduated to Swiss German, but it's like this, yeah. Maybe it's the toxins leaving the body, and I can't impersonate him exactly, but I can do this, and is close. The orderly is supposed to be monitoring him for 30 minutes. Wow. But there's apparently eels in the tank. Like, he notices something like kind of brush by him. We see them all gathered at the bottom of the tank. And of course, a nurse comes to distract him, yeah. She starts to strip while he touches himself. Not Lockhart, but the orderly who's supposed to be watching Lockhart. So, of course, we're making good use of time here. And as he's jerking off, she feeds him some of the treatment, the cure, like, has been... It's not presented well. Like, it's presented in the movie, like, in a very passing manner. That you see him, like, drip stuff on his tongue. You see other people take it from time to time. But it's not presented as a rare enough resource or anything like that. It's not presented as medicine. It's just a thing people do here. But apparently, it's enough for this dominance, submissive relationship to happen for her to feed it to him. It's so weird. But, like, Lockhart starts freaking out in the tank about the eels. He's slamming his hand on the side of the glass. And Lockhart ends up freaking out so much he loses his mask. He's clawing at the top of the thing, but he starts drowning and he flatlines because there is machines monitoring his vitals, just no one's paying attention to him. And he has this flashback of his father killing himself. But they manage to pull him out and resuscitate him, which they do without getting wet, which is a miracle of actions. I'm just going to be honest. It's incredible that they are able to do that. Unless they just have a hook or something that we didn't see. Maybe. I don't know. But back in the office, because he just comes out and goes back to his old tricks. He goes through someone else's files. He notes that people are missing teeth. And he hears a toilet rattle, which he goes to investigate. And then he gets distracted. He looks out the window. He sees Lockhart Lockhart sees the groundskeeper taking a body or person into the weird grounds building that's out in the middle of the ground yard. But out on the grounds the next day, Miss Watson informs him that she's discovered some more about the Baroness. Citizens burned the place to the ground based on the Baron's human experiments, not because he was banging his sister. Which is understandable. They did something very similar to Frankenstein. Which this could be a Frankenstein story of sorts, just twisted, if you really want to think about it. But he confronts the groundskeeper, who doesn't speak English, so they can't communicate properly about what he thinks he saw. And he spots Hannah, so he runs off to frolic with her. You could argue that this is not the cleanest of relationships, but it makes sense. They're the closest people in age. She's definitely interesting enough of just why she's there, let alone anything else. Personality-wise, she seems fairly interesting to talk to. But the biggest point seems to be that she has a bike. So, yeah, he's got a cast on his leg, so he can't really pedal himself. So he ends up trading the ballerina toy that he has from his mom. I say toy, it's from a music box. And he manages to present it in such an intriguing way that she takes it as payment for her to ride him to the next town. And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know who I have in my life that I gotta be willing to do that for. Like, I'd probably end up doing it, but, like, I wouldn't, like, really, like, want to do it for anybody right now. It's like, that's a big thing, like, because they go, like, quite a ways. But at the bar, he ends up meeting the car driver that he's talked to before. He seems to be recovering a lot better. He meets a cop or a military guy. You can't really tell. I'm assuming it's a constable. The bartender yells at the teenagers because apparently every town has punk teenagers. And suggests a pseudo doctor, like he's a veterinarian or some shit. Like, I don't know. What are you doing? Weird cat. Anyways, so he leaves Hannah at the bar. He joins her for her first beer. She mentions her mother died in a fire, foreshadowing, and like really blatant too. It's not like a lot of the mystery's gone by this point in the movie, so you're just kind of like wondering like what the fuck. Not necessarily what happened, but for the details, it's like, okay, we know kind of what happened, but how did that happen? So we keep getting information on that. So Lockhart ends up going to the shop. He meets a mute kid who's drawing, and he's drawing Baron stuff, and the not doctor. And there was something about like someone pays him not much, but enough. I can't remember why that was important, but at the time it seemed important. So back to the bar, Hannah's investigating things. The teenagers take interest in her. There's even a point where Hannah's in the bathroom and she's sitting like on the toilet, and the teenage girls come in and do stuff, and they leave a piece of lipstick, and Hannah comes out, investigates the lipstick, and tries it on, which is not something you typically want to do with strangers' lipstick, but like it's her first time wearing lipstick, and so she kind of has this moment of vanity of things, which is fine. It's a normal thing, at least here in America. But it's the first time she's seen other girls her age, so she's like, am I supposed to be like that? So there's a behavioral science to that type of thing, that I don't want to get into, but I want to note. So at the shop, Lockhart's pieced together like the connections between today, like the present day and the Baron, and finds out that the Baroness was infertile, not exactly sick like he previously thought. So the thing the Baron was trying to cure was her infertility, and it could have been maybe that like they were brother and sister, and like he couldn't get her pregnant that way. But it could be that she was just infertile, and no one who was banging her could get her pregnant. But, oof. So we switched to like a really weird scene, which is still building information and everything. But the guy has a cow on a rack, and I have no idea how he managed to get the cow on the rack, unless maybe he laid it down, got the cow tipped over because the cow's leg was broken, and then tied the cow down to the rack and dragged it all the way back to the shop to then cut it open while it's still alive. Very weird scene. Don't know why you would do stuff like this. At least cap the cow first. And the fact that the rack is like up above their heads is amazing, but it sets the scene up really well. He said he found it drinking sewage water, or had a broken leg and found it drinking sewage water. And cows are dumb, so they'll do stuff like that. They'll poison their own water and drink it. Cows are really dumb. They're maybe sweet, but they're dumb. So yeah, he cuts it open while it's still alive, and like not only does a dead calf pop out, but all these eels pop out. It's the same type of eels that we've seen before, that Lockhart has seen, and so he's like, there's some connection with all this, and I don't think there's any explanation of like how those eels are here, or if eels are common or anything. So you almost need like a biology degree in eleology to figure out that like this is not a normal type of thing to happen. It doesn't make any sense for the eels to be in the cow, alive no less. And eels are friggin' creepy, and there's some batshit crazy versions of eels out there, but like nothing like this. This is nothing normal. There's no normal stuff about the eels in here. Back at the bar, Hannah picks a song from the jukebox and dances, if you want to call it that. She's just kind of mimicking the little ballerina doll, I think. But it looks like a cross between ballet and stripper sizing. It is what it is, what it is. Lockhart ends up making a phone call. It turns out the facility never reported the collision to his work, like they told him. So he's been lied to directly. So they're definitely up to something. And of course, he still has a cast on his leg, so when the teens get handsy with Hannah, he can barely do anything about it. But he confronts her. The teen starts up with Lockhart, because, like, not only is that a moment to kind of, like, look good to her, but he doesn't like him to begin with. And they fight a little bit, and he ends up pulling a knife, and the doctor shows up. And everyone there is obviously afraid of him. He wipes something weird off his face, which could have been blood or makeup or his face shifting. Who knows? But Lockhart and Hannah end up returning to the facility. The doctor scolds Hannah. Hannah's having cramps, which is obviously what it is, even though like nobody admits to it. Because Hannah's not been given any type of education about her own biology, as far as like being able to like understand what menstruation is. And if she had, I don't think she would tell the doctor. I think she would be smart enough to hide that. But he tells her that she'll be ready soon, which is super creepy, even if you don't know what's happening next. But a lot of it... God. I don't know. Special case. Ready soon. She's an impatient teenager coming of age. So, in his dreams, Lockhart ends up dreaming of Hannah and a tub full of eels. Apparently his brain runs Japanese sometimes, I don't know. But he wakes up, he ends up pulling out a tooth, and not just like, oh, my tooth broke. He pulls out the whole thing, to the root. Like, the root comes out with it and then snaps. It's that graphic. But he goes, and he seems to not feel it either, which is the other thing. But he goes to the front desk, who seems relatively unconcerned. She puts it in milk, because that's a myth you do about things like that. But uses the opportunity to find Pembroke in a transfusion fugal, whatever that actually means. I think fugal means tube, if I'm being honest. But it's in the basement. Lockhart has to sneak about. And again, he's on crutches, so he can't really do that well. But there's some guy who's just left in the hall. He's missing teeth. He starts screaming. The orderly yells at him and then actually punches the guy who was screaming. Lockhart steals the elevator to go to the sub-basement, which the fact that this facility has a sub-basement kind of creeps me out again. But the fact that it's all off-limits underground. Ugh. But he finds Mrs. Watkins in a storeroom. It's not like she's even like in a place where you keep patients. She's like literally in a place where you keep bottles and medicines and clipboards and shit. But she's alive, and she tells him that the Baroness was eventually cured, and the villagers cut the fetus out of her before they burned her alive, because they're kind like that. Everyone in this town's monsters, it seems. But her skin starts moving. He freaks out, knocks over a shelf. And the way when I say her skin starts moving, it looks like something's swimming underneath her skin, essentially. He goes to hide, and he finds himself in a room full of people in tanks, and not just in tanks like he was. Like, in tanks that are built into the wall. Like, the walls of the room are the tanks. So, it's just... I don't know. He seems dead, but, like, his body seems to be moving around on its own. Kind of like Mrs. Watkins' stomach was. But the doctor ends up catching him in the sub-basement, and Lockhart blames his tooth. He said he was looking for help with his dentistry needs or whatnot. So they take him to the dentist's office. They strap him down for his own protection, as they do. Honestly, there's cases where I would have preferred that, but... and the dentist drills right through his tooth. There's no pretense left at this point. They're just torturing him. There's no point at all where drilling through the front of a perfectly good tooth is going to solve anything. Because they don't ask him which tooth. They just go, they grab him and drill. And then outside, he jumps in the back of the car as it's dropping somebody else off. He goes to the police station and tries to report the facility, the good doctor, if they will. But after the constable leaves, he spots a bottle of the cure sitting on the shelf, unattended. You'd think, as rare as this stuff is, that he'd be more protective. And of course, the doctor shows up because the constable, unable to prove anything on his own, just reports to the doctor because they have a relationship and goes, "One of your patients is here and he's crazy. Get him out of here." And so they've got plausible deniability all coordinated. And Pembroke even shows up. And I don't know if it's because Pembroke wants to show up or he's essentially being coerced. I think we can go with the latter, honestly. But Pembroke shows up, claiming Lockhart tried to abduct him. And they ask him to keep Lockhart away from him, which doesn't make any sense for him coming down there in the first place, if that's the case. They claim he's a patient, and he's always been a patient, which, again, doesn't make sense for several reasons, especially given his age. They take him back to the facility. They put him in his little room. His toilet rattles. Turns out there's eels in the tank somehow. Now, as someone who... I'm still having trouble with this fucking toilet. Has taken apart a toilet a few times. I'll tell you, that tank's not an easy place for anything to get up into. So it doesn't make any sense that, like, those eels would be in the tank, let alone in the toilet at all. But he freaks out a little bit, and then he goes back to look. There's no eels, but he sees one go down the drain. And I think it's his brain, like, what we're seeing is his brain trying to reconcile a clue that he has that he needs to follow the water, the drainage. Like, where does it go? And follow that. But instead, he rips up the toilet. And they finally break him, and he starts spouting the same kind of gibberish that we heard from Pembroke's last will and testament earlier on. Hannah ends up viewing him in the tank just like he saw Pembroke. I think she was just checking his D, but whatever. He's about to drink another glass of water, and he finally smashes it, and then uses the broken glass to cut the cast off his leg, and his leg is fine. Now, granted, it's a little paler. It's probably a little weaker from being underutilized, but it's healed. That's the point. He goes and breaks into the grounds building. He spots the groundskeeper and follows him through these caverns. He finds an underground lab, which is actually a pretty cool looking scene, but there's not a lot to come from it. There's lots of focus on eels, the remains thereof. There's stuff in jars. There's lots of focus on babies and remains thereof. There's lots of stuff in jars. Ugh. And a picture, a very quality picture, like a painting portrait of the Baroness that happens to look just like Hannah. He then looks around and he finds Mrs. Watkins. This time she's dead and dried up, but the fact that he found her in, like, the different stages of things, like, obviously, like, there's murderous intent here, and we have enough evidence for anyone in the sane mind to go along with it. And for whatever reason, I think she's underground in the same kind of area, but not in the same place. Hannah gets into a pool. No, she's in the facility. She gets into the Olympic-sized swimming pool there. She gets in the pool, but she's obviously having her period, which she never pieced together that's what the cramps and everything were. So the eels come out of the side drains or whatever to investigate. They don't do any harm to her. They just kind of circle up on her. They do kind of investigate kind of invasively at first, and then they get their distance. Lockhart's hiding from the groundskeeper, who eventually finds him, and he has to wound the groundskeeper. But back upstairs, but they're both running away from this point. Lockhart and Hannah run into each other. She bursts in the dining hall. She's soaking wet. She's bleeding. She doesn't know what's happening. She's very confused, upset, etc. And she confronts the doctor about what's happening to her. And then Lockhart confronts the doctor. And then Lockhart confronts the patients. And he tells them the doctors are making them sick. The doctor the whole time is warning him to shut the fuck up. Let's be honest with this. But Lockhart is telling them that the doctor's making them sick. There's nothing wrong with them. That the doctor wants to poison them and keep them there because he's using them. The doctor continues to warn him against it, and then they all get up and they zombie after Lockhart en masse. It's a beautiful, beautiful twist on the traditional story of warning the masses of something happening to them, because just the level of what's happening. Imagine a drug ring. At this point, there's enough evidence in the movie that I'm not spoiling anything else for the rest of the movie. Not that it matters. But imagine a drug ring, on a city scale, and you take all those people that are involved, and you pull them into one building. That's exactly what this is. That's the whole problem with the cure is that it's addictive. And you're essentially bringing people to a hydrotherapy place and then injecting them with heroin. And then you tell them that you're the only place they're going to get that heroin, so they stay, and they're loyal. And it's bleh. But they ended up putting I don't know, maybe they knock him out and the orderlies and the doctor do it, but they put Lockhart in a transfusion fugal, like a big tube thing, an iron lung essentially is what it looks like, and he's right next to Pembroke, so he has a buddy to talk to. And the doctor admits that the water is toxic, unless you use the cure, and the cure seems to counterbalance it. But the way you get the cure is through the extraction process that they're putting them into. So it all comes down to this weird pyramid scheme where the lower levels die off. So the people who get the cure the least end up getting sicker and sicker and sicker, but you can still put them into the process so they get some of the time to keep them motivated so that you can produce more cure from them. But there's only so much cure to go around, so given an infinite timeline, everyone involved in the process will eventually die. But there's a euphoric euphoria that comes with the side effect. So, anytime you see someone after that droplet of cure, that's what they're feeling. They're getting a high from it. And it's counteracting poisons inside them, so yay. So the doctor goes in and just shoves a tube down Lockhart's throat. The eels go down, and the cure comes out. So, so another day, Hannah goes and talks to the doctor. Hannah talks to Lockhart. He's been incorporated into the facility just like everyone else. He's chasing his dragon. So it's very similar to earlier on when he had broken. He's broken again for sure. She's losing hopes of ever leaving the facility because she's getting older and feeling more independent. And Lockhart's just brainwashed at this point. His teeth are all fixed, and Hannah returns the ballerina that she got from him, kind of hoping that it'll remind him of life past what's happening to him. Because as loyal as she is to the facility and the doctor, she doesn't understand what's going on at all. The doctor even says that at one point that she may look like an adult, but she's got the mind of a child. So who knows how old she actually is when she's actually going through all this. She could be 18. I think they probably have a number buried somewhere in the movie. I'm not going to go look for it because there's more scenes happening. So at night, there's this weird-ass cultist ceremony. The doctor looks like he's marrying Hannah. It's the Ward marries daughter thing, which at best is usually a symbolism of dad marrying daughter, and we see it in Sweeney Todd. We've seen it in several other things. I just can't remember at the time because it's not worth remembering. But back underground, the doctor's showing Hannah around. He shows Hannah his weird bed / shrine, because like over the bed is the picture of the Baroness, which looks like Hannah, and Hannah says she doesn't want to. But back upstairs, Lockhart is putting the last of the puzzle pieces together. And underground, the doctor's tying Hannah to the bed, because that's what you do after you marry people, if you're kinky at least. And she manages to hit him, and he tends to it very strangely, like very, oh my god, this damage to my face. And he's talking about raping his sister. It's in a very slow manner, as if it's designed to convince somebody. Like he prepped and practiced this story, is what it seems like. Because I'm not going to go into it, but like the story begins like she didn't like it either at first. So Stockholm Syndrome, best case scenario. Man, this fucking movie. And he's talking to his daughter, who he's just married and tied to the bed, about making something pure, because evil geniuses are obsessive like that. But upstairs, Lockhart manages to smash a picture or two identifying people from way too long ago. Underground, the doctor's making progress with Hannah, that's all I'm going to say. And then Lockhart finally interrupts and confronts him with the truth. Everything everyone here has figured out by this point. So the exposition is just for us, the audience, if we haven't managed to figure it out, that she's his daughter. And then the doctor pulls his face off. Which, I'll be honest, even re-watching it for this, I didn't exactly remember that part. I knew that there was something going on with like his face when he, like, small things would happen to it. But for him to just go and face off, very disconcerting at the time. But of course the natural response is for Lockhart to light him on fire. And he manages to free one of Hannah's hands. And I was looking at those knots. It should not have taken that long to untie her, or for her to untie herself. Like, people need to learn knots a little bit. But he's fighting the doctor, because the doctor interrupts them untying the second knot. The fire ends up flowing upstairs. Somehow, now, granted, in the right conditions, anything can become combustible under the right heat, but somehow the fire ends up flowing up a vent and lighting a curtain on fire, which I'm completely unaware of that being able to happen. Now, if the material that the curtain is made of has a low enough threshold for combustibility, sure, maybe the hot air could eventually heat that up, but it wouldn't have happened that fast. It's very odd, because the flames would not have traveled up that tube like that. So we're gonna lean on our suspension of disbelief there a little bit. Lockhart manages to throw down at least half. He gets thrown down half a story and lands on stone steps. His back's broken if he's not dead. I don't care. There's no way he lived. So my suspension of disbelief is immediately broken after the fire thing. So having two things like that close to each other kind of ruins the moment, which it's a really cool moment because it's facing off hero versus villain, maybe? I don't know if he's a hero. He's trying to save a victim, so yes, he becomes a hero. I have a 3-point story narrative definition. Characters are always either heroes, villains, or victims. Either something is happening to them, they're doing something to someone that the victim, or who is a victim that doesn't want it, or it's a hero trying to save a victim. It doesn't necessarily have to be against a villain, but the hero can try to pull a victim out of a storm, something like that. In that case, the storm would be a villain, but it's not required for the definition. See, and I managed to lean him out of my suspension of disbelief long enough to have that conversation. So, so the doctor ends up holding him over the feeding spot for the eels, because we saw the groundskeeper dumping bodies in there earlier. Like, the eels expect food in this one spot, so it's definitely the one spot where they do attack. And Hannah interrupts with a dad, like almost like a loving daughter would, and then she puts a shovel through his head. The thing that made me go rewind and look again, though, is that he already has a scar on his head in almost the exact spot in which the shovel lands. So I'm wondering if, like, we didn't see a mistake by the makeup artists, that they had prepped like a glue line or something for the shovel piece that goes into his head, because we don't see it enter his head. We see Dad, he turns around, she swings, and we cut back to him with a shovel in his head. And to me that makes sense logistically, that's what they would do. But of course he falls into the feeding ground himself. They eat him, because why wouldn't they? Upstairs, the building burns. Most everyone is trying to run out. There's like the assistant to the doctor, who just stays in the burning building. I think he knows enough that he wouldn't want to face the punishment for the atrocities they've committed, or live without the cure, because he's definitely one of the higher people on the chain who's had it more often. Most of the people seem to get out, and they go out to the grounds at least. Some people are still dancing, like some are actually grabbing buckets and walking from a fountain to the place to actually put it out. Oh my god, just let the place die. There's no way that chain of buckets is actually going to do anything. And there, I don't know. Look, I'm not going to get into the efficiency of a bucket chain. But Lockhart ends up riding Hannah out of the facility on the bike, and a car shows up on the road, and they manage to hit it, which really is a moment of brevity the movie needs at that point. But the car is filled with board members who have come to take Pembroke and Lockhart back because Lockhart apparently failed. But he tells them that Pembroke's gone. They order him to get back in the car. He refuses, and he rides off with Hannah. Now, granted, the building's burning to the ground, so there's really no danger of getting into the car. I think the point is that he's chosen to leave his life behind. So he has chosen a cure for his wellness, but it's not the cure that the facility offered, obviously. It's Hannah, essentially. Like, he's riding off with the girl. They're going to go somewhere and get it on, because that's what you do at the end of movies where things end happy. And good for them. Good for those guys. This is definitely a creepy movie. I can't say without a doubt that it's a super scary movie, but it's a good psychological thriller with supernatural edges to it. I highly recommend it. I believe this is on... I should probably check my recommendation list on Letterboxd. I've got like a Camera's Choice list out there on Letterboxd. Lists. Sorry, I love my list titles. Time Travel is the Worst is definitely one of them. Did I put this on there? No, but I'm looking at the movies that I do have on here, and I can't say that this is quite on par with them. Though it's really close. I could see me changing my mind at some point. Damn, I kind of want to list them out. But, it's fine. We're not doing that. If you want to see it, go over to letterboxd.com/Camerai. It's lists, Camerai-choice. But, like, just check out my lists. There's fun stuff there. I've got a lot of ratings there. I gotta get caught up. But, that's what happens when you get sick and you don't have a backup plan. All by myself. But thank you for watching. I just want to say have a nice day from all of us here at #WeAreMovieClub. This has been Scary Movie Squad. want to see anything else we're up to, go to click the annotations and they'll take you to our other channels. Thanks for watching.